Every day, you encounter many different kinds of people. Some of them are very delightful. Some of them are very difficult. Some are inspiring. Some are irritating. Some of them are fascinating. Some of them are intimidating. The fact is that a lot of problems that we have in life are just personality conflicts. We just do not get along with people. So in your notes, when your relationships are bad, life stinks. Yeah, life is miserable. You may have lots of money and opportunities, but if your relationships are bad, life stinks. So it's very important that we learn to get along with other people. James gives us some very practical advice. How do you relate wisely? The key verse is in James 3, verse 18. And those who are peacemakers will plant seeds of peace and reap a harvest of righteousness. So James says that every day, in every relationship, you're planting seeds. So what kind of seeds do you plant? Seeds of anger, jealousy, seeds of peace and confidence, seeds of insecurity, or seeds of kindness. You plant many different kinds of seeds, but in your notes, what you sow, you will reap. What you sow in your relationships, you will reap. So how can I have a peaceful relationship? How can I plant seeds of peace? Well, James says we need, in your notes, wisdom. We need to learn to be wise in the way that we act toward people. Too often we treat people in very foolish ways, in unwise ways. We provoke the exact opposite behavior, what we'd like to see. Today, common sense is not so common. A lot of smart people today are not too wise. People may be educated, but they really don't have wisdom. So James says three things in your notes about wisdom. Number one, James defines it. He defines what real wisdom is. Number two, James then shows how it differs. Divine wisdom is different from human wisdom. And number three, James details just how it operates. Look at James 3, verses 13 to 16. Who is wise and understanding among you? Well, let him show it. How? By his good life, by deeds done in humility. That comes from wisdom. Wherever there is jealousy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder, evil of every kind. So James says that wisdom is actually a lifestyle. It has nothing to do with your intelligence. It has nothing to do with your relationships, your character. Imagine James coming to your church today. So James says, may I see the hands of everybody who is wise? If you're dumb enough to say, raise your hand, he would probably simply say, prove it, show me. Show me your wisdom by your lifestyle. Because wisdom is not a matter of what you say. It's a matter of how you live. Wisdom is not a matter of your words. It's a matter of your works. Not so much diplomas on a wall. It's your disposition that shows how wise you are. How you get along with other people. That really shows how wise you really are. Because it's a lifestyle. Wisdom has more to do with character and relationships than it has to do with education. So James says in your notes, lack of wisdom causes problems. Wherever there is jealousy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and evil of every kind. A lack of wisdom, James says, causes problems and chaos and confusion. So do you have confusion in your home? Do you have chaos at work? Is your life a mess? What you lack, then, James would say, is wisdom. So look at James 3, verse 17. In fact, please read it with me together out loud. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial, and sincere. So how do you know if you're wise or not? By the way, how many of you have taken an IQ test? Raise your hand. How many of you passed it? Today we're going to take from James 5-point wisdom test. We're going to see how wise you really are. Number 1, in your notes, if I'm wise, I will not compromise my integrity. If I am wise, I will not compromise my integrity. James 3, verse 17, but wisdom that comes from heaven, James says, is first of all pure. Pure means authentic and uncorrupted. James is saying that if you're wise, you're not going to lie or cheat or swindle anyone. You're not going to manipulate people, because all relations are built on trust. You have to have integrity in your life. Dr. Leonard Taylor, he invented the lie detector, tested over 25,000 people, and he concluded that people are basically dishonest. In the Bible, there are 2 books on wisdom: James in the New Testament, Proverbs in the Old. We're going to look at both today. So look at Proverbs 10, verse 9. The man of integrity, he walks securely. That means he's not afraid. He's not afraid he's going to be found out. Because he says one thing over here and another thing over there. Because he is speaking with integrity. But he who takes crooked paths, Solomon says, will be found out. So you notice, no man has good enough memory to be an effective liar. Eventually you're going to slip up. You're going to get caught. If you have integrity, then you have confidence in all your relationships. If I'm wise, number 1, I will not compromise my integrity. Number 2, if I'm wise, I will not antagonize your anger. I will not antagonize your anger. Look at James 3:17. He says the wisdom that comes from heaven is, secondly, peace-loving. Wise people work at maintaining harmony. They're not always looking for a fight. Wisdom is peace-loving. So if you're wise, you're not going to be walking around with a chip on your shoulder, daring someone to knock it off. Ever met someone like that? They're always arguing. They're always looking for a fight. They're very defensive. Well, James says, if you're smart, you do not antagonize people's anger. Look at Proverbs 20, verse 3, where Solomon says, any fool can start arguments. The wise thing is to stay out of them. Now, what exactly causes arguments in your family? If you're wise, then you know, because only then can you avoid them. So let me give you 3 things that causes arguments. If you're wise, you're going to avoid these 3 things. Number 1 in your notes, comparing. You are just like so-and-so. Why can't you be like so-and-so? You're just like your mother. When I was your age, you're just asking for a fight. My first husband even, or my first wife, you're comparing. When you start comparing, you're asking for a fight. On the back of your notes, number 2, condemning causes anger. It's all your fault. You should be ashamed. Any statement that begins with you lays on guilt, brings on shame. One person said you can actually bury America with a lot of little digs. Number 3, the 3rd cause of arguments is contradicting. How do you like to be interrupted in the middle of a sentence? It can be very irritating. A couple comes over, the guy says, on May 4th, we went out fishing. Wife interrupts and says, no, it was May 3rd. He continues, but Bill and I, it wasn't Bill, it was John. Well, then John and I went fishing. No, you didn't go fishing, you went hunting. William James says in your notes, the secret of wisdom is really knowing what to overlook. Wisdom is peace-loving. Look at Proverbs 14, verse 29. If you stay calm, Solomon says you're wise. But if you have a hot temper, you only show how stupid you are. How many of you have seen people with a hot temper that look really stupid? Raise your hand. Have you seen people like that? How many of you have looked stupid? Many of us have. If you want to be wise, number 1, don't compromise your integrity. Number 2, don't antagonize their anger. And number 3, if I'm wise, I will not minimize your feelings. The 3rd test is if I'm wise, I will not minimize your feelings. Looking again at James 3, but the wisdom from heaven is considerate. And you know it's considerate in the Greek, epiakos. means mindful of the feelings of others. There's often a mistake, however, that we make. We think that if you do not feel the same way I feel, then your feelings must be invalid, are just silly. James says that you wise people are, however, considerate. They do not minimize other people's feelings. Your wife says, it's cold in here. You say, no, it isn't, it's hot. Who's right? Well, you both are. People have different body temperatures. Or, I'm really depressed. Well, you shouldn't be. But I am depressed. Well, you shouldn't be. Then don't be. If I'm wise, I will not minimize your feelings because I'm considerate. Looking at Proverbs 15, verse 4, kind words bring life, but cruel words crush your spirit. Too often, when someone has expressed their feelings, we tend to belittle it. We ridicule it. Someone with half a brain would not feel that way. But not put downs. If I'm wise, I do not minimize your feelings. Ever play that game in your house, in your notes? My day can beat your day. Ever play that game? Husband comes home at night. He's worn out. He's tired. He starts to complain. The traffic was bad. Air conditioning broke at work. My boss got upset. The wife says, oh yeah? Junior dunked the cat in the toilet. The phone rang and the burns bean in the oven. The fact is, both of them had tough days. So wisdom is considered the feelings of others. Allow your spouse to be tired too. The reporter was asked, did you wake up grumpy this morning? He says, no, I let her sleep. If you care, you will be aware. The new husband had his new wife preparing the very first meal. She said, my two specialties are meatballs and peach pie. She brings it over to the table, and he says, which one is this, darling? If I am wise, I will not compromise my integrity. I will not antagonize your anger. I will not minimize your feelings. Number 4 in your notes, the fourth test question. If I am wise, I will not criticize your suggestions. If I'm wise, I will not criticize your suggestions. A wise person can learn from anybody. He's not defensive. He's not stubborn. Look at James again. He says the wisdom from heaven is submissive. The Greek word for submissive, oipaitos, is used only one time in the New Testament. Submissive is really a poor translation here. It literally means in your notes, reasonable. It is willing to listen, willing to learn. The RSV says open to suggestions of others. So are you a reasonable person? Can your kids reason with you? See, the Bible says if you are wise, you're open to suggestions. The unwise person says in your notes, don't confuse me with the facts. I've made up my mind. If I want your opinion, I'll give it to you. Look at Proverbs 12, verse 15. Fools think their own way is right, but the wise listen to others. A man came up to a new pastor and said, I didn't like your sermon today. The pastor said, well, tell me, what didn't you like? The man said, well, you read it. Secondly, you read it poorly. Thirdly, it wasn't worth reading. Another member heard this, felt very bad for the pastor. He comes to the pastor and says, don't listen to old Jim. He just is repeating what everybody else says. A wise person, number 1, does not compromise his integrity. Number 2, does not antagonize your anger. Number 3, does not minimize your feelings. And number 4, does not criticize your suggestions. Number 5, in this wisdom test, if I'm wise, I will not emphasize your mistakes. If I'm wise, I will not emphasize your mistakes. Looking at James 3 again, where James says, but this wisdom from heaven is full of what? Mercy and good fruit. Do you jump on people when they blunder or fumble the ball? When people stumble, do you say, good move, klutz? Do you use the people in your family as the butt of your jokes? Sarcasm, in your notes. Sarcasm is really humor at the expense of others. Or do you save up your memories of others' mistakes? Hold them as leverage. Remember the time that you did that? See, in your notes, an unwise person keeps bringing up the past. James says that's dumb. There was this guy telling his friend how his wife, whenever he did something wrong, she would come in and become very, very historical. The other guy said, no, you don't mean she becomes historical. You mean she becomes hysterical. Oh, no, she becomes historical. She tells me everything I've ever done wrong. James says, wisdom is full of mercy. Looking at Proverbs 17, please read it with me together out loud. Love forgets mistakes. Nagging about them parts the best friends. So if you're wise, you do not rub it in, you rub it out. You do not hold it over their heads, you forget it. When people stumble, they really don't need your judgment. They need your encouragement. Looking at James 2:13, where mercy triumphs over judgment. Wisdom is full of good fruit. That means kindness and kind actions. So in conclusion, how are you going to rate yourself on this wisdom test? I want you to put an X on each line to rate yourself. Number 1, I will not compromise my integrity. Number 2, I will not antagonize your anger. Number 3, I will not minimize your feelings. Number 4, I will not criticize your suggestions. And number 5, I will not emphasize your mistakes. Maybe you feel that you did not do very well in this test today. What do? Look at James 1, verse 5. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously. See, God promises. If we simply ask him, he promises to give us his wisdom. For knowledge, we can look around. For wisdom, we look up. Because wisdom is always a gift from God. Look at Colossians 2, verse 3, where Paul says, please read it with me together out loud. Christ is the key. It opens all the hidden treasures of God's wisdom. God's wisdom is all in one package in your notes. God's wisdom is all wrapped up in the person. The person is Jesus. And you can have wisdom when you believe and trust in him. In your notes, Jesus' sacrifice on the cross forgives, and that's critical. You need healing and forgiveness in your relationship with God and in your relationship with others. Jesus' sacrifice on the cross gives you forgiveness. So James says, Jesus also gives you wisdom, a wisdom to relate wisely to others. Through the hearing of God's word, through the receiving of the sacrament of the Lord's Supper, you will receive God's gift of wisdom. Amen.